Right, so if you've seen the video where I was talking about how I was done with Spectrum, and in my RadioMaster Zorro video that I was looking for this as a backup transmitter, I finally managed to get one. So this is the T-Pro from Jumper, and this is the latest addition to the lineup of my transmitters that I'm shifting over for Robot Combat. But having used FlySky, which I found to be better than Spectrum, I kind of wanted something different and more profesh looking, if you would. But the FSI6, which I used to use quite a lot, I am actually hanging on to for a stage show that I put on, as well as some stock Beetle weights that I'm building. But you can also go over to my Roboteering channel if you want to see more on that. But for now, here it is. So this is the Jumper T-Pro, I've already said that. Now, just like the RadioMaster Zorro, it is game controller shaped and is available with different modules. For example, you've got ELRS, CC2500, and what I've selected is the 4-in-1. So this means that I can use it with the likes of FlySky, Spectrum, and other modulars in between. So there was also the Jumper T-Lite, which I did have my eye on. However, that's been discontinued. And then this came along, the T-Pro V2, which, if I'm being honest, I did like the look of compared to the T-Lite. And the T-Lite I have held before, it was comfortable to hold, but I did feel that the controllers, the main gimbals were a bit too close to one another and a bit too big for that transmitter. So with this, finally got to go alongside with the Zorro. Time to take it to the kitchen table and see what the contents of the box are. Right, so I've not actually filmed with this tripod, so this is going to be quite interesting. It's quite a long, like 2 metre tall tripod. It's a little bit wobbly at certain points, but it'll have to do. And you'll have to excuse the shadow of the camera because I don't have good enough lighting for this part. Now, I did take a little peek before actually filming this, just to be sure everything was in the box. So we do have, there's the instructions there, there's some stickers which are actually kind of quite adorable and overall fun to use, and there's the actual carry case itself. Has it got a handle? Yes, it has, which is important. It's actually not smaller than anticipated being, and I'd like to think that everything in terms of content is in that carry case, apart from our instructions and the stickers, which were on the outside, obviously. So here we go, and there it is. Oh, I actually quite like that. You know, it's got Velcro. And for £100, considering what you get, you got a gimbal stabilizer, and there's the actual transmitter itself. Actually, the antenna, which, okay, it's actually a lot lighter than I anticipated. I don't think I've got any packs. So there's a little modular adapter around the back. I don't think it comes with any batteries, and let's come with. Okay, so it charges via USB-C, but I don't think they've included a cable, which is actually no biggie because I've got plenty of USB-Cs kicking around about the house anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal the fact they didn't include one. But in terms of what the actual transmitter takes, I'll have to see if I'll just be a bit gentle, just clip my fingers so that. Actually, what I'll do is I'll try and figure this out, but overall it's actually really nice to hold. Yeah, I love this thing so far. But that's the whole thing unboxed. So what I'm going to do is try and work out how, I'll read the instructions, work out how specifically to get the battery compartments off, and I'll come back to you when I've done that. So I feel like I've made a bit of a mistake. I couldn't quite dig into these bits with my fingernails because I clipped them last night. I typically would like to leave one unclipped just so it makes it easy to dig into things, but because it's a bit of a long story, but I did use a flathead screwdriver, which I think in itself was a bit of a mistake because I did end up leaving a couple of marks. I don't know if you can see them very well, but you can see them, maybe if I zoom in. Yeah, so that wasn't a good idea, and so we can see that it takes 2 battery cells. I did have the name. I did have the name of the cells up on the list somewhere, but I did have a feeling it wasn't going to include these batteries, so I was prepared just in case I did need to buy some. So these take 18650 batteries, which are available either lithium ion or nickel metal hydride. However, I'm probably going to put lithium ion in this, just like my Zorro, because nickel metal hydride just isn't worth it anymore, because it just doesn't deliver as much power and as much current as lithium packs do. So that's what I'm going to be putting in this. So if I can get just how long it takes for me to get the covers. But I have to say, I think it's good that these covers are the way that they are, because once they're on, it's actually quite difficult to get them back on. And also, this is the only part I really don't like, because the fact that I actually thought this would make quite an interesting. So unlike the Zorro, where they just slide off, there's multiple points in there that you have to poke in to keep the battery cover nice and secure. So that's one side done, and it doesn't make scratches noticeable, which is good. So one side done, and now onto the second one. So this is pretty much the only flaw I've found so far with this transmitter. The fact that the battery covers have to be poked in respectively so that it's properly sealed. But now I'll worry about that after the camera, so you can't really see it. But yeah, so here we've got our gimbals here. We've got quite a few switches there. We've got our jog wheel for the menu options there. So interestingly, we've got power switch just right there. Now the trims, I was curious where they were, because I didn't notice any switches on. But these here, these are the trims. So it's 2 channels in one, whereas trims would have their respective channel. Don't have like a sort of a 2-way switch, like the Zorro or the Flyer, for example. Actually, I've got a FSI4 here I can show you. So unlike here, for example, where you've got your trims on toggle switches, they're actually, so you've got 2 so each gimbal has its own sort of trim lever, so you can probably adjust 2 trims at the same time. You can do it diagonally. So that's nothing I've actually had in a transmitter before, which is interesting. So our antenna here, which folds down nicely or folds up like that, if needed to, and turns 90 degrees like so. But because I don't have any battery cells to put in the transmitter, what I might do is see if I can see if I can plug. Sorry, I'll see if I can plug a USB cable in and have the thing running on a power bank, but I'll see what happens from there. So I'll go and get a power bank and see if that works. Okay, I'm not optimistic about this in the slightest, but I do have a power bank. There was a cable literally just in the top right corner of the screen, just off-site. But here we go. Okay, so we've got the blue indicator light on. Let's see what happens from here. Okay, so it's green around the back. Right, so I'm holding the power button, but okay, yeah, so it's a bit of a mild inconvenience, but turns out you can't use the transmitter with USB power alone, so it does actually have to have something inside of it. So I'll buy some batteries off Amazon and wait for them to arrive, and I'll cut to when they do arrive. Right, well, I didn't really want to put NIMS in this thing, but given the options that I had, I didn't really feel like I had a choice. I wanted to put lithium ions in, but oh well. So I picked up this 4-pack for $14.99, which was actually not bad, so it worked out pretty cheap per cell. So I put them in the back of the T-Lite, and then once I'd done that, I put the battery covers on, put it on charge. You can see the LEDs, the 6 individual ones, used as charge indicators. Now, one thing I did find was even with the batteries in, you can't use the thing while charging, and it's not really major, but it's good to have it just in case needed. But when I unplugged it, the transmitter turned on, no problems.
Welcome to HTX. Switch warning.
Also, I've shifted over to this microphone clipped on my shirt. I haven't used it in a while, so I want to see how the audio plays out and see if it makes anything better. But here it is. So this is the Jumper T Pro V2, and so I just want to bring the Zorro in because obviously this is my main transmitter for smaller weight classes like ant weight and beetle weights, but I did want to buy a secondary one just in case I build a clusterbot or I build some loaner bots for friends to drive, so it's quite
nice to have this on the side. One of the things you may, I'm going to go a little bit off topic, but one of the things you may notice that I've done with the Zorro is put some silicone fun grips, and I put them on the FlySky FSI 6s for stock beetle weights that I've built. So I've put yellow on here to indicate the stock bot that would be yellow. So there's that. So I've got 6, and I'll have all 6 colour coordinated once I've gotten 2 more. Now, in terms of why I put blue and red, so blue just because favourite colour, and I've got to be a little bit colour biased, but also red on this gimbal mean that weapons are operated, and, you know, weapons, depending on the type, like for example spinners, can be very dangerous, so red indicating the colour of danger. It just made sense to me to put red on this side, and also just to be a little bit different and stand out a little bit more. So also I was worried that it was going to get confused, because there's a guy called Gareth Anstey who built his robot police team, and his colour schemes pretty much share the same colour coordination as this. For example, like the black, the blue and the red. So Garthy, please don't send me a cease desist if you're watching this. Anyway, we're going a bit off topic. So bringing the Jumper V2 in. Now, in the comparison between the two, the RadioMaster has a bigger advantage with a bigger display. The display in comparison on the Jumper T2 is quite small. In terms of overall holding the transmitter, I'm a bit conflicted, because the Jumper T-Lite is thinner, but when I hold the Jumper no, this is the Jumper T Pro, not the Jumper T-Lite, messed up my words there, sorry about that. So the T Pro V2 does feel nice to hold, and it's quite lightweight. In comparison, because even with the cells in, it is quite light and nice to hold. However, even though the Zorro is a bit thicker, it does feel like the extra girth on it does make it more comfortable, and does feel nice to hold, and quite shaped nicely to go around the hand. So I'm conflicted. I do like the overall comfort of the transmitters equally as good, but I'm very torn between the two. The Jumper T Pro I do like because of how light and how easily it fits into the hands really nicely, whereas the Zorro, because of the extra girth, even though it's heavier, I don't know, I'm a bit conflicted. Which of the two feels nicer to hold? Honestly, I do not know. I do like both equally, but I think that will be a tough one to decide on, because I do actually really like both transmitters. Anyway, so going off topic, going back to the Jumper, so what we're going to do is I'll go over just a few basics. We obviously know how transmitters work. You've got your controls, you've got menu, you've got menu selection, and your return here. Now the trims are very interesting, because unlike on the Zorro, sorry to go back to this, the Zorro you've got toggle switches respectively, so there's like 2 for each gimbal. However, with the Zorro, it's in not the Zorro, with the Jumper T Pro V2, these are your trims. So I'll show you how these work when I get the transmitter turned on. In fact, if I zoom into the display, maybe that would make, yeah, so that's a lot better. So, turn the transmitter on.
Welcome to HTX.
I love the fact that it just
Level
took,
warning.
because yeah, that I do need to sort out. Now, a couple of things I did want to mention with the transmitter. So these buttons here, what are they for? They don't actually specify. It's just listed on the briefing, the brief introduction, as individual 6 buttons. So there's not really, they don't really say what they do or what they can be used for. I've glossed over something in the instructions, but I think if you alter the settings on your receiver model, they can be used partially for control, along with the buttons on here, as well as the switches, and depending on what channel you're going with. But I only intend on using 4 channels and no more with this, because of the type of things I do use with this. Now, if I do zoom back in onto the screen and show you the trims, so GR3E, which is the receiver model which I've selected. Now, so if you want to go, so it's a 4-way lever gimbal for each trim, so you can adjust. I love the noise. I'll hold it close to the microphone. Hang on.
Trim center. Trim center. Trim center.
No dear. I had no idea what it could do. But yeah, so if you can hold it diagonally, you can adjust 2 trims. Okay, I was doing it earlier, hang on.
Trim center. Trim center.
Also love the verbal warning trim center, which is on my Zorro, which is nice. So let's just try holding it diagonally, just... Oh, here we go.
Maximum trim reached. Maximum trim reached. Trim center. Trim center.
Yeah, so you can adjust 2 at the same time, which is so...
Trim center. Trim center.
Or you can just do the
Trim
one, which
center.
helps.
Trim center.
Anyway, so let's go on to the menu. So if I press down onto the jog wheel, that should... Oh no, it's the menu button I need to press. So I have done a few channel listings here. So I've got a few different variations of the FS2A, which I did put down somewhere. It's gone off somewhere. Where is it? Oh well, no biggie. So yeah, but the FlySky FS2A is probably the common receiver that I will use with this thing. And if I can get the camera to focus on this, that would be great. It's probably the best you're going to get. Maybe if I hold it like this, yeah, that would be better. So I've got FS2A mix, which has channel mixing set on it. I did have to play with it very differently because on the Zorro, I had no issues, but it got a bit funny doing it on the jumper. So I did have to alter some of the settings and also copied and pasted a little bit. So there's 6 models in there in total. Now there is one thing, so HTX on the Zorro was doing this, and there's one problem I've been having with this. So let's say I want to copy a model. Let's say copy, for example, the GR3E mixed. Now, let's say I want to put it into model 8. So I press down on that, and it doesn't. So where does it go instead? It goes all the way down to model number 60. But the way that I've found around that, let's say I want to do a copy of FS2A. So I want to back up model. So let's go on to number 7, restore model, and there's... So yeah, that if you want to copy models, I feel like that's more the better way forward, because if you try to copy it, it will just send it straight back down for some weird reason. So delete that model because I don't need it. Now, sticking with the GR3E, in fact, obviously I'm not going to go over basic stuff. Obviously I'm not going to be going through absolutely every aspect of the transmitter, just basic stuff. We just want to basically make sure that the thing works and does how it should be. So going on to the GR3E, so if you do want to, probably should zoom out so you can see me doing the controls. Anyway, that's better. So tilt that up so you can actually, wonder if maybe if I did turn the lights off, that probably wouldn't help actually. So let's go on to the menu button. And I've not actually... Oh wait, sorry, sorry, I've had a bit of longer. So I'll go on to the setup section. So we've got setup, heli setup, which I won't need, flight modes, won't need that, inputs, which is interesting because you can alter some of the settings. I might need to do that later on because I'll show you why. So mixes, don't need to do that on here because I've got another channel separate for the GR3 that does that. But maybe if I do want to do a tutorial, or there's probably tutorials out there that show how to do mixing, but outputs, curves, logical switches, special functions, might have to play around with that actually. So sorry, hang on. Just to special function, I might see what that... Ah, okay, yeah, so that will be an interesting... I'll have a play around with this probably at some point over the video, but for now let's just go on to setup. So one of the things that you obviously, because I've got the 4-in-1 model, I had to select, so you've got modes, then you've got mode off, but obviously you're going to want multi, so you've got different, there's too many to name, but you've got quite a wide range of receiver modulars to choose from. But the one I want is FlySky, and because the GR3E is running off of FlySky's AFHDS receiver modular, so it's not the... Oh no, my camera battery's about to die. Sorry about that. So anyway, as I was saying, if I want to use something like the FS2A or the FSA3, which I may plan on using with this transmitter, so the one I would want is FL Sky 2A. However, interestingly, there is one for the FS2A receiver specifically, so that's good to have. And so the one I would really want is FlySky, because that has AFHDS1 as opposed to AFHDS2A, which is the newer version of FlySky's modular. So I'll leave that. So pull the camera out, because there is something, and this is the first time I'm going to be using anything with this transmitter. So this, you're probably wondering, what the heck is this? So this is something called the Fight Test Dummy. So the stock beetle weights that I built, this was built for target practice, so that those with no experience with robot combat whatsoever, getting their first taste of the sport for the very first time, you know, growing up watching shows like Robot Wars or BattleBots, they can get their first proper taste at robot combat. So it's a good platform that I have going, and this is something that I've been wanting to build since the platform started, and this is it. So this is the Fight Test Dummy. It's specifically built for cannon fodder for the teams who are trying out the sport for the first time, and it's built in a specific way so that it's easier to flip, ram, get underneath, all that kind of jazz, and also can probably get itself when I haven't tried to get it off. So these are also quite low torque. They've only got like a 4. I'll dabble on too much. I'll save it for the Robot Combat channel when I make a video about this. But what I'll need to do is to bind. I've already got the bind plug in the receiver. You can see the GR3E just right there. So I've got a Turner G Nanotech LiPo. Probably need a slightly smaller one so that it fits in better. Maybe if it fits in, yeah, like that. So that would help. So we've got the battery plugged in, but the first thing I need to plug in is this. Now this is what's called in Robot Combat a removable link, and it's basically a safety link that every robot must have, so that it can be immobilized for safety reasons. So just basically pull it out and the machine will stop. So it's pretty standard to have this in combat. So basically anything above 150 grams, it's imperative that you have one of these in your robot, and it's also against the rules not to have them in any competition along with a power light in certain classes. Because I do have a power light there, but it's kind of, it works, but it's flickering for some strange reason. And I did put the correct resistor on. So what I'll do is I'll just put a pair of pliers underneath. So the transmitter is gone into bind, and if I bring this back up, so it's going to be quite awkward to hold. Maybe if I zoom in a little bit, yeah, that's better. So this is actually the other gripe I have with HTX transmitters, is that there's no bind button, so you can't just like turn the transmitter on and hold a bind button down. So this is the only way to do it. So you have to go into the setup menu and scroll down and go into bind. So I've already got bind selected, so what I need to do is press down on the jog wheel. So put that aside, and if we look into the receiver, so the receiver light is on and it's static, so get the bind plug plugged out. So what I'll just need to do is just turn the transmitter on and off again, and if that doesn't work, I'll have to pull the removable link out. Okay, I'll have to plug the link out and then plug it back in. Okay, so that noise it made means that we have control. It means it's connected to the transmitter. So here we go. So forwards and backwards works fine. However, interestingly, because of the way it's laid out on the transmitter, so left and right is supposed to be on this stick, but it's not. Instead, it's on here. So it's not quite ideal, and also it's kind of going in the wrong direction. So if I have to be careful, obviously how it does. So forwards, backwards, that's fine. But yeah, you can also see how it's going in the opposite direction. So I'll put this aside to fix this, and it holds up nicely so it doesn't drive off. So how do we fix this? Well, if we go onto the menu go into the functions setup, or inputs rather. So what we need to do is swap Ellie, as I'm just pronouncing it just for the sake of it, and Ale. So we need to replace those two. So if I go on to, probably hold down the menu button or hold down, yeah, so hold down the jog wheel and then press edit. Then what I'm going to do is replace the source with Ale. And then we go back. So once I've done that, I'm going to replace... Right, so that works brilliantly. And although I've not got... Wait, hang on a minute. Sorry, I've just remembered there is a much better way of doing this. Let's say we want to change the controls on the RUD, for example. So hold that down and go and edit. So another way you can do this is to use the control that you want to use to be. So just basically, let's say for example, if I selected this. So all I need to do is just go into source. Now, if I select the throttle. So yeah, that works. So we don't want to do that. So what we need to use is Ale, and that's been done. So now that we've done that, so if I'll just go back. Yeah, so that works fine. You don't switch around the servo reversing on that. Now, because I've got nothing for Ale. So we want to go down and to hold down the jog wheel, press edit, and then just go down to source, press that, and use the RUD. So there you have it. So now that we've done that, we've got the drive all on one stick, but we still need to sort out the reversing and the endpoints so that we have left for left and right for right rather than left for right and right for left. Now, also I just need to get it in the camera a little bit. But if we're going to go on to mixes, don't need that, outputs, curves. If I try going on inputs, let's see what that does. Let's see if I edit that offset. Trim on side. Hold on a second. Well, thanks to this tutorial from Painless 360, we're back in business. So I've worked out how to do the servo reversing. So what we need to do is go into inputs. Now, because the forward reverse is plugged into channel 1, the steering is plugged into channel 2, so that is the one that needs reversing. So hold down the jog wheel and press edit. Then we go into direction and then press that down, and now that's inverted. Is that right? Yeah, so there we have it. So I'll try not to say also. So we've done it. So the transmitter is doing its function like it should be, so which is incredible. Probably find a place to drive this and put this down so that you can see it a bit better. Alright, so I put it down in this little space just so you can see it, how it operates, and now the control of this, in terms of the overall robot itself, isn't good. That's only because the motors have got like a 4-in-1 rear-show gearbox, so it's not quite ideal for full combat, but it is decent and does the job for little projects like this. And considering it's just basically cannon fodder for target practice, it's not really that big of a deal.
Okay, I think you've got the idea of that. So that works brilliantly on this. And the next step that I want to do is I do want to get something from my work shed to test out on this and try out these special functions, but I'll have to do some more playing around with the transmitter. Once I've done that, I'll show what I've done and cut to when I've done that. Right, first of all, you're going to have to excuse the tumble dryer going on in the background. I don't really get the first say on a lot of things in this house, and I can't really have that not going at the moment. But one thing I decided to do was just to make the buying process a lot easier. If you've got two models that are running on the same receiver, I just found it easier to set those two or multiple versions of that in the receiver into bind mode and then bind onto the transmitter, and then that in itself just made it so much easier. But there is one thing about Edge TX that I want to showcase that I've never actually looked at properly, and I've kind of glossed over, and I've just discovered the perfect use for this time around. And apparently this isn't new. The FSI 6s can do something similar to this, as well as probably the DX6i, so I've never really bothered with this across the transmitters that I have owned previously. So if I turn it on, I just want to go over to special functions and show off something that I've done that's actually quite useful. So you can see, so there's our throttle. But you can see if I press the button here, it's also triggering the throttle as well. So I want to show off how I've done that. So if I go on to, I believe it's 8 or, no, it's 10, isn't it? So onto special functions, I've selected the override to channel 3. And in terms of if I wanted to do anything else, let's just say if I hold that down. So let's say, for example, I'll override channel 4. So I've got SC, so to that's SC for channel 3, but let's say, for example, or if I want to use this switch for, yes, let's say if I wanted to override channel 4, select that to 100, which I'll probably zoom in so you can see it a lot easier, but yeah, so I select SA to override, so let's just turn that all the way up to 100, press the tick, just double check to make sure I've got the right one. So now that I've done that, if I am so incompetent in this video, I don't know what's wrong with me, but what I've done is, I figured it out, so I've got SB up to override channel 4 and at minus 100, so then I've got SB down to override channel 4 at positive 100. So if I just go back to show what I've done, so that's our 4th channel, and here we have the SB switch, which is also used for 4th channel. Now the only problem with doing this is, let's say if I just turn it off and turn it back on again, I'll centralise that so you can see why you probably shouldn't be doing this, but
Welcome to HTX.
yeah, so this switch needs to be down, so that means that when you turn it on, it's basically the equivalent of this stick being right here. So that I'm going to turn off, but I just thought I'd show it just so you can get a taste of what these special functions can do, but I will remove this off the transmitter once I've done. So in terms of other special functions, so I've used this button, so we've got our throttle here on channel 3, but what I've also done is used this button for the throttle as well, so just press that down. And the reason why that function comes in handy is this is my ant weight flipper Ahua, which is named after the Tom and Jerry reference from Baby Butch, for example. Okay, I think you get the idea with that. So if I turn it on, just so I can show you what I've done. This is why I show the drive there just a little bit. So here we've got our 3rd channel, which operates the weapon, and if I push the button, so that if I, hang on, so that is actually a lot better. So if I do a self-writing comparison, so first of all with the throttle stick, and if I try it again with the, doesn't seem that much of a difference when you look at it. Actually, if I try it on this way, let's see what.
Now let's try flipping something. So I've got this 2-wheel drive and weight pusher, which I've sold and need to get sent off. So flip this, and then try it with the button. Okay, definitely felt faster there. Let's just do it one more time. Probably got a little bit of yeah, I think I got a little bit of air time in comparison. So that's the special functions, and I've pretty much gone through everything that I wanted to overall with the transmitter that I feel I need to. So without all that being said, time to go over to the verdict. So that was a brief summary of the Jumper T Pro V2, and is this transmitter a recommended buy? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Just like the RadioMaster Zorro, I love the way this thing holds. I love the game controller style shape of it. It fits in the hand brilliantly, and just overall incredibly nice to hold. There are a couple of problems, or maybe a few minor inconveniences I do have. The material and plastic it's made out of does scratch a bit easily. It did scratch a little bit in there when I was very gentle trying to get a screwdriver to pop open the battery covers. But now that's covered up, it's no biggie. But these also are a little bit of a job. It's a bit of a, for example, you have to open it in there as claimed, but I found it a lot easier to open it from this side. And if you haven't got any fingernails, that's a bit of a problem. So the battery covers I'm not really a huge fan of. I do prefer them on the Zorro where they just slide off, rather than these sort of squidgy rubber bits. They do fit on nicely once they're on there though. And there is one minor inconvenience, is the fact that there's not really any plugs or covers on the ports, and you've got a heat ventilation down there, which, because that's facing downwards, there's not going to be anything getting in there. But you've got your serial port, you've got a 3.5mm jack, and your USB port uncovered. There's the SD card slot and they're uncovered, so it's not exactly immune from environmental factors and other moistures. Whereas, for example, on the Zorro, here you've got a cover on the USB port and another port there. There's also a couple of covers on the back here as well, and a cover for the back modular there as well. But the other also problem I think a lot of people are going to find is the display is a bit too small for the Zorro. No, not the Zorro, this is the Jumper T, like the Zorro is over there. So I'm just going to bring the two in terms of comparison. Now, in terms of what you would want, if you want more out of it, I would say go for the Zorro, because you get a bigger display and you get games on there, which is good to have, and you can check that out in my video about the Zorro if you want to learn more about that. But also, it's, yeah, the chunk is, so in terms of, I probably said this earlier on in the video, but in terms of which one is nicer to hold, honestly, I'm very conflicted. I do not know, because the Jumper T-Lite, it's a bit thinner, and it's also quite light, and it's really, really nice to hold. However, when it comes to the Zorro, the extra girth does tend to fit around the hand a lot better and makes it a little bit more comfortable to hold. So, in terms of which I prefer out of the two, honestly, I don't know. I'm very conflicted. I do like both equally as good, but I would say that if you want something more nice and compact and you're on a budget, I'd say go for the Jumper T Pro. However, if you want more out of a transmitter like this, I'd say go for the Zorro, because you've got the bigger display. Because, I mean, if you look at the overall size, and I also want to try out the turn-on speed. So, for example, I'll have to try that again so it doesn't, hang on. Let me just turn that off because I need to do it. Let's try it one more time, sorry.
Welcome to HTX.
Yeah, so the Zorro actually turns on quicker than the Jumper T-Lite. So it's not by a huge comparison, but I do believe in every second counts. So if you want a quicker turn on, the Zorro is definitely more the way forward. And I also want to talk about the carry case as well. So this is the size of the RadioMaster Zorro carry case. However, let's bring in the Jumper T Pro's carry case. So it's much smaller. So I think, yeah, I don't think this is even going to do justice, but in comparison, it is just a lot more compact in terms of carrying than the Zorro is. So, like I just said, so this is the one I would recommend if you are on a budget and if you want something more compact. However, I would recommend the Zorro if you want more out of it and the bigger display and a lot of other functions as well. In fact, there is actually quite a few things I've done. Looking at the Zorro, I haven't tried this button. So I did use this button on the Jumper T Pro for special functions to activate the throttle / flipper. However, I just remember that these are on the back as well. So maybe I could try experimenting. Actually, I think that would be better to hold than using that button, so I might have to look into that. So that's really all I have to say about the Jumper T Pro, and there is one other wrap-up that I do want to talk about as well. So there you have it. That was my thoughts on the Jumper T Pro V2, and despite the minor inconvenience I mentioned earlier, I do still really love this transmitter and really happy that I got one in the end. And despite the fact that I bought this as a backup and will make the Zorro my dedicated transmitter for Antweight Robot Combat as well as other lower weight divisions, I basically bought this as a backup for stuff like the fight test dummy, which I showed off in the video earlier, as well as for stuff like clusterbots and loner bots that I'll have for friends to drive, so this will be perfect for them. And so I'm going to be taking a bit of a step away from the Zorro as well, because at the next Oxfordshire Robot Combat Society event, I am going to be hooking this up to all of the machines that I'll be taking with me there, and seeing how the Jumper T Pro V2 compares to the RadioMaster Zorro. But once I've done that, I'll probably end up switching back to the Zorro, just because, purely just for the sake of getting this as a backup. But I can't wait to see how I'll get on with this in competition fights. Now, just like I said a few times probably in the video already, I would say if you do want something more out of the transmitter, probably the Zorro would be your best bet. But if you are on a bit of a budget, I think this would be your, I think this would be good as a startup, for example. And the thing that I also wanted to say, I probably said this in the video already, but I previously held the Jumper T-Lite, which was the predecessor to this, and I wasn't really quite a fan of how big the gimbals were on that one, whereas on this, the gimbals are the right size, and they're quite the right space apart, because on the T-Lite, they were a bit close to each other and a bit average size on a standard transmitter. But the design of this one, I think, is perfect, and I go as far as saying the design on this is a lot better than the T-Lite, because the T-Lite, I did briefly use Ben Garbutt's one for his robot called Hercules when I was I've tested that one out a couple of times or a few times, but the T-Lite I just couldn't really get used to, whereas this is the perfect, and I definitely think that this handles a lot better and is a lot more comfortable to hold than the T-Lite. So the T Pro V2 is definitely a worthy successor to the T-Lites. And that's enough about me rambling on about this transmitter. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I think it might be February by the time this goes. It's actually mid-January, so January is quite a bit of a quiet month. I don't normally have anything to upload, but I've managed to fill up a month with videos, so quite happy with that. In terms of what I'm actually doing next week, don't know, might be going on a bit of a break, but whatever I get up to and whenever I do upload next, I'll see you then.